Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Party Talk, where we empower leaders in youth drug prevention. I'm your host, Jake White, and today I'm getting to talk with Devin Duncan. And just to tell you a little bit about him, right now he is currently in high school, but check this out. Not only is he a student enrolled in high school, he's also enrolled in some of his college classes. He's a student advisor for the Prevention Action Alliance. He's working part-time at Topgolf too. That's not bad. He's a digital media intern for a credit union. He's a student intern for the Student Safety Advisory Council, and that's part of the Ohio Department of Public Safety. And last but not least, he's a teen ambassador for the Ohio Attorney General's office. So, I mean, dude, is there anything you're not doing right now, Devin?
It's funny you say that because I hear that all the time. Is there anything that you're not doing? So no, it seems like a lot, but it really isn't too much when you put it all in. You kind of put it into your passion. It doesn't feel like a lot of stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, and you're focused. You're focused on making the change you want to see in the world. So it probably, like you said, it's your passion. It's all in alignment. I just have to ask, like, why? Why do you do this stuff? What drives you?
Sure. I think the easiest answer to that is, I'm passionate about impacting my community. And it's funny that you said you introduced me based on my LinkedIn profile, because I think my headline describes me pretty accurately. It says something to the sorts of a high school student passionate about changing the system. And it really is just passion that I have for my community, passion for making it a better place to live, work, and raise a family. And I think that sometimes often people say, well, why do you do certain organizations, or why are you involved in that? I think it's because all of those things work in the community. They work in bettering the community, whether it's about school safety and making schools safer for students to be in, making students feel comfortable, or whether it's a teen ambassador advising about issues that impact youth. And I know that one of the things that we talk about there is fentanyl, and how that is becoming more and more clever, becoming more and more targeted towards youth. And so that's just an example, but there's so many things that, I do, and all involves around impacting the community, making it a better place to live, work, and raise a family. And that's what means so much to me.
Wow. And you know and you might hear this from adults as well, is just like to hear a student your age talk about that, building a community that's better to raise a family. It doesn't sound like a lot of the youth that we interact with. You sound like you just have a focus on the future. Why do you think that is?
I think ultimately, I feel like more youth, and I guess I would kind of take a contrast to that. I think that more youth are involved and they care than we think. I think that we don't spark their fire, is what I call it. And it's very interesting in a lot of things that I do inside my school. I serve on a lot of committees, one being, Diverse Cultural Diversity Alliance, focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion within the school. We also have positive behavior intervention supports. And occasionally they'll come and they say, hey, we want some students to come. And I always find it interesting, because when I go ask a student, hey, I have this project, I think that you'll be great for it, do you mind tagging along? I always get yes. I don't get no's. And it goes to show, well, people are interested. It's about maybe having the courage to come forward. And I think with me, I'm very putting myself out there. I don't really mind it. Take this podcast, for example. And I said, but I think some students aren't like that. And so there definitely are some students who, may not have as much faith, may not have as much hope in their community as I do. But I think sometimes it's just about sparking their fire, sparking their interest, finding their passion. And I think ultimately, once we do that, I think that everybody is passionate about one topic in their community. And sometimes it's just a kind of about finding that passion. And I say empowering, youth voices to get involved. And I think your talk is called Empowering Youth in Prevention, or something to the sort. And that's a word that I like to use very often. Sometimes it's just about empowering their voice, letting them know that they have a voice and that they have a spot in that community that they can advocate for change too.
Yes. And I love the way you put that, because you're not an anomaly. You're not this one student amongst a million who's doing great things. Like you mentioned, you just need to create that spark, to invite someone in. And that's what I've seen too, is some people will look at me and, even starting in college with prevention, people are asking, well, what makes you want to do this? Or how do you get hundreds of students to attend a party that doesn't serve alcohol? That's the basis of my story. And what I had to tell them is, I'm not an anomaly. There are thousands of students out there just like me, but they're waiting for that invitation, because we're not all in that leadership mode of, yes, I'm going to start a movement or I'm going to spark a change. But if somebody were to invite them into a change, they would be happy to jump on board. And so that's what I see you as. You're leading. You're not just passionate about changing, but you're leading the way. You're inviting other people into it. You had just shared before we press record, is a little bit about the Q&A that you just did. I'm wondering if you'll share some highlights about some things you're able to share from that event, what that event was, and then a few of the things that might have been helpful to the audience from it.
Sure. And so I want to quickly jump back to the other thing. And the thing that I want to say is it's about creating safe spaces. And that kind of ties a little bit into the conversation that I had in Q&A. It was with OPA. I think it's the Ohio Prevention Professionals Association. And I was invited there, a part of my work with the Prevention Action Alliance. And one of the things that I did was go through a Q&A and kind of give my perspective. And, it covers a lot of things that I've shared throughout the answers now, but a lot of what it was is how to get youth involved. And a part of that is creating spaces where it is something that is youth led. And youth led is one of those things where youth are leading the change, but they have adults. And I would say you, Mr. White, are one of those where you're helping them, you're advising them, but they are leading the change and they're leading the way. And that's a lot of what Prevention Action Alliance does. There's a youth-led part of that group, and they actually just hosted the We Are Change rally, focusing on telling youth that they are the change, empowering them to be their real selves. Previously, it was called We Are the Majority, focusing on that majority of youth aren't partaking in drugs, aren't abusing substances. And so, it's one of those things that I covered. It's really just about having those spaces. And that's partly why I love Prevention Action Alliance, because it empowers youth in that space to kind of take change and focus on the initiatives that mean so much to them. And so I spoke to OPPA, and that involves people from all different sorts of walks in prevention, whether it's working for a school, working for a government or local agency, working for grant organizations, kind of our perspective to what that means. And I think that means, again, empowering the voices, allowing them to lead the charge, but also understanding that not all youth are the same. And it ties back to We Are the Majority. I do believe very strongly that majority of youth aren't partaking in substances, aren't going to these parties and doing all types of different things. But I think we focus so much on the negative that we leave out the majority of people that are in the positive. And so I kind of, encourage them that whatever role they are in, and it doesn't necessarily have to relate to prevention, but really focusing on, and you're going to hear me say empower a lot, but not necessarily empower their voices, but empower the people who are making positive choices, because people think that making negative choices is the popular thing, when in reality, more people are making positive choices. So we're empowering those people who are making positive choices. I can see those people kind of coming back, and really realizing that, look, it's not cool, it's not fun, it's not funny, whatever the case might be, to be on that, hey, let's go do this, let's go to this big party, but to not do that, to not go to this big party, to not, be abusing these drugs. And so that's kind of what I share. And it all kind of ties into what I'm passionate about.
Yeah. And that's really helpful, because I think you're right. The negativity is what gets the news coverage. The negativity and the catastrophes are what get all the attention. But the student who's making great choices, going throughout life, they don't necessarily make waves, right? Like, you're not hearing about their story, or they're not drawing attention to the fact that they're making great choices. So I love it, the fact that we can celebrate students who are on the right path and who are making positive change in their community. And even the ones who, hey, I don't want to make the waves, I just want to follow somebody who is making a positive change. And so whenever I do presentations, I'll share a statistic like that, hey, the majority of students in high school who are surveyed say that they aren't using drugs or drinking. And a lot of people get this question wrong, because I do it in a game show. So I'll ask them, like, is it 20% of high school students don't use drugs, or is it 50? And a lot of them say that it's 20 when it's 50 or greater. And I'll even ask, like, how many of you raise your hand if you think that's not believable? There's no way that it's that high. But, when I was in school, even in college, I read a similar statistic. But in 2 years, I didn't meet a single person who said, Jake, I don't drink, I don't smoke. So if the statistic is true, how come we're not talking about it? And that's where I think the change actually comes from, is when we do start talking about it. We start showcasing people who are doing great things instead of just showcasing the students who might be getting into trouble.
Right. And I love that you said the game show and the data, because that's a lot of what I do in the Fairfield Youth Coalition, which is at my district. And a part of what we administer across our district is a pride survey. And what that does is that is a survey administered to grades 6 through 12, and it gives you great breakdown of what's happening inside of district schools. And it's also administered across counties, very wide. And so we get that data back and we're able to see kind of that. And we go and we have this presentation called Forming Effects. And we do the same game show where we say, what is the percentage? And it's mind blowing that many people think that the negative is the more popular thing. And it's really not. So that's what I love also kind of about prevention, is because we do get that tangible data that we're able to focus on. And we're able to implement what I like to say is risks and protective factors, and really kind of enable those. I know here at the high school, I've kind of been leading the way of a positive messaging campaign, and we really realized through the Pride survey, and due to COVID-19, that people are not necessarily viewing themselves in the most positive light. There's a lot of stress, anxiety flowing around. So that's kind of it's not prevention. I don't believe prevention is just focusing on alcohol and how to prevent students from abusing it, or drug substance, how to prevent students from abusing that. I also think it's relating to how to address the root. And sometimes the root could be anxiety, it can be stress, it can be the feelings of fitting in. And so if we're looking at that data and we're saying, I'm noticing that the data is saying that majority of the students are a portion of students that's concerning is stress, or they're feeling a lot of anxiety. How can I, go towards that? And what I see is it's positive messaging, conveying positive messaging to youth. We know it works, and having them internalize that message, and that's addressing the root. And so I think that another big thing is using data to drive change. I think prevention does a very good thing at that, and how that kind of all relates to, addressing the root of why people are partaking in these substances is extremely important. And that's what I love about prevention work as well.
Yeah. Tell me if I'm hearing you right. So what I'm hearing you say is that prevention is not just the stay away from drugs message. It's about how to cope with life's, challenges. It's about dealing with anxiety. It's about resilience. It's about creating an environment where people can fit in and feel good without doing those things. Correct?
That's spot on. Exactly what I'm saying. Very spot on. That is exactly what prevention is. And it's about touching all the aspects, not just, the ones that we know, to be, the biggest, most popular ones, but, again, that resiliency, that courage, whatever that might be. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes. I wanna ask you a new question, and yeah, tell me as much or as little as you can reflect on in the moment. But I'm imagining somebody listening to this, an adult saying, man, how do I find a Devin in my community? And I think the funny thing is they're all over, right? Like, there are students who are hungry for change. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, is there somebody who has walked alongside you or has gotten you interested in this, that you can tell us a little bit about them and how they were able to bring you along on this journey, or maybe spark something in you? Is there somebody like that in your life?
Sure. It's so funny that you asked that, because I'm a junior this year, and I was just talking to someone and they're like, what are we going to do when you leave? And I'm like, you know what? There's going to be another person that is the new Devin Duncan of this community, of this school, and it'll be just fine. So it's very funny that you asked that. So I think that there are youth that I feel like have inspired me, and youth that have done, very similar things, that have been very involved. But I also think it's adults as well. And I like to think that adults have probably been the more driving part of that. I feel it is they're recognizing my potential. And I think getting involved in the Prevention Action Alliance actually started because my youth coalition invited me to CACA. And in CACA, I met a lady, and I know that you're presenting there, but I met a lady, and she said, I think this group would be really good for you. You really fit in the ideas. And so that started Prevention Action Alliance. When I got appointed to the Student Safety Advisory Council for the state of Ohio, that started because somebody had said, you know what, Devin, I realize that you're so passionate about school safety. That's good. I think this will be a good opportunity for you. And so I think that youth have definitely inspired me to get involved. They've told me that youth can be a part of the conversation, but I think it's also a lot of adults that have kind of seen that potential, that spark that fire, and say, you know what, Devin, I think this is an excellent opportunity for you. You should partake into it. And I'm still kind of getting referred to those opportunities now. And some of them I partake in, I follow up on, and some of them I'm like, hey, I don't think so. But it still is comforting knowing that that adult realizes that I can do more and that I can be a part of more, that, my voice would be valued in this community. And so I think if there is an adult listening, if you have that kid where you're like, you know what, that kid could be the Devin Duncan of my school, that kid could be the Devin Duncan of my community, pull them aside, have a conversation with them, allow them to realize that they can be, in this committee, that they can be in this group, they can apply to this organization, that they should put themselves out there, and keep following up with them, keep checking in on them, making sure that they're doing okay, that they're, fitting it, whatever that might be. And I guess you would call that a mentor. But, they may not come to you, but if you come to them, they're going to, I know they will flourish. And that's kind of what I've done. And I've built a good circle of people who care, a good circle of people who love me and mentor me to be where I am now. And so that's kind of the advice or the thoughts that I would give on that topic.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Devin. And I think I want to double down on that too, because a lot of the times that we might not see someone who is like the perfect advocate or the perfect person doesn't exist, but realizing that when you work in schools, when you work at young people, and if you're listening to this, imagine yourself back in middle school and high school. You're probably insecure about a lot of stuff. You don't know a lot of things. Maybe you're just coming into your confidence, and to have somebody validate who you are and say you are good enough, you can make a change, you can make a difference. Just someone speaking that into your life could be a change moment for you, where you start pouring into positive things and becoming someone who talks about changing your environment and making it safer for families. Like that could be something that you could help create and foster, not something that you discover, but in a way that you can actually help bring that out of someone. Because Devin, I think that you're right. There are students everywhere. They're all around. But if they're invited into something and shown that they're valued and important, that can bring out the best in us. And I know myself included. There was a guy in college who called me out on the stuff that, I wasn't say like I was going down the wrong path, but just some of the things that I was doing that weren't responsible or bringing out the best in others, called me to a higher standard. And I was like, wow, I could do that. I could become someone who's responsible and resilient and bringing people into good things. So yeah, dude.
I really love that you said that, because it's not always I see that you're doing really good. It can say like you're getting yourself into some trouble, and I know that you're better than that. And so there are definitely two sides to that conversation. I also want to say it can start at home as well with parents, and I know that my mom has been really influential into getting involved in my community as well, as much as, and I would say she's been more involved, but as good as teachers have been as well. And so, it can be both sides to the conversation, and that I definitely love that. It's maybe you see that there's this trouble. I shouldn't necessarily say troublemaker, but someone that's getting into trouble that is much better than that. And that, like you said, maybe falling down that or going down that wrong road, where you can be that person that steps in and turns them around. And I think that the prevention work, and I know at my school, the Youth Coalition has been that place for a lot of kids where, showing them that there is definitely that positive light to youth. So I really love that you included that. And I just want to say that absolutely be both sides of the conversation. Someone that is already doing really well, or someone that might need a little bit extra encouragement to turn around and pursue their passions another way.
Yes. Well said. And let's do this. I want to ask you, is there anything that you see happening in prevention, maybe not in your school, but just anything you've seen? Is there anything happening in prevention that is not working for your generation? And you're like, hey, if you're listening out here and you're in prevention, please do not do this to us. And then the other
Ooh.
side of that coin we can talk about next. But is there anything that you're like, hey, stop doing this, please?
That is definitely a hard question, and I'm trying to think back to how I answer that in my panel discussion with Oprah. But I think I want to say, I think a lot of youth are tired of being talked down to almost. That's the biggest thing that I would probably say is there's a lot of, talking down. There's a lot of negative stereotypes out there. There's a lot of, if you don't do this, you're destined to be this. There's a lot of back in my generation, we didn't do this. There's just a lot of those, lines, things of where we're talking down to you, and I think a lot of you right now are kind of saying, I'm not taking that crap anymore. And so if we want to, impact change, we got to meet youth where they are. I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. Sometimes we're not really meeting them where we are. We're basically saying, I'm above you. And yes, you are an adult. But I think if we want to have a conversation with you, we have to realize that we got to meet them where they are right now. And we got to talk to them like they are a young adult that they are. And so that's kind of the biggest thing is we stop with the stereotype, stop kind of talking down on youth, but treating them like an adult, talking, empowering them rather than, back in my generation, we didn't do this, or, this is, sir, you guys are the weird, that's the recommendation that I would give.
Yeah. And that's good because I think that can be the easy way out for an adult who doesn't like somebody's behavior is, hey, stop doing this. And there's no real partnership with another person to say, hey, you're doing this. Is that meeting your goals? Is that working? Okay, if not, let's create something new. I did an episode. If anybody wants to dive into this, what I think you're talking about, I just learned the name for it called restorative communication. It's not telling them what to do. It's partnering with someone to create a new plan and a way to go forward. And it's extremely powerful, I'm learning. And it's a new topic for me, but if anybody wants to check out that episode, it's a few back. You can kind of dive into that, but it's all about creating that partnership, not talking down to someone, but really, building them up. And like you've been saying, the common theme of this, Devin, is that empowerment.
Yes. And I love that you said restorative conversations, because one thing I love is restorative practices on side of schools. And a lot of what that's about is kind of finding the root of a problem and working towards them to address that root. That way they don't feel like they have to do that anymore. So I'm not familiar with restorative conversation, so I'll have to kind of look into that. That's why I always say you never stop learning, but I am kind of familiar with restorative practices. And that's really about addressing the root. And that's what I think a lot of things are, is when we tell someone stop doing something, okay, they might stop temporarily, but ultimately, if there's some type of underlying issue that's making them do that, eventually they're going to revert back to that practice. And so I just think that in anything that we do, we got to strive to realize the root of why somebody is doing that. And so if somebody is, let's say a scenario, someone's staying out late at night and they're not wanting to come home. Okay, well, why are they not wanting to come home should be the question, versus punishing this kid and say, now you're not going out anymore, or don't come out, or, come home right away. Why do you want to be out so late? And I think that is where you work mutually with the kid to get things done. So I absolutely love that question. That is that, or not that question, but that answer, because restorative practices, conversations, oh my gosh, that's so important to me.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and thinking, no, that doesn't sound strong enough, I need to tell people what to do and what they expect of me because I'm the adult. My question is, how is that working out for you? Because that's the truth. If you're using that method, you are probably also really frustrated because you aren't getting the results that you want. And if that's the case, insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting different results. Why not try the restorative conversations, the restorative practices for, instead of punitive, to try those things. Cause I think you're right. And Devin, just so you know, I worked in Ohio a few times, some
Mhm.
at schools, middle schools and high schools. I actually was just there last week doing a youth coalition conference where they brought in students. And so we talked about resilience, how to protect your decisions, and how to, make an influence in your community. But one of the
Mhm.
restorative ones is we did our curriculum, restorative curriculum in one of the juvenile detention centers. And that was really cool because it was one of those things where, as an adult, already feeling like, hey, how am I connecting with youth? There's time in between us that separates us. So how am I really going to connect? And so I want to end this with just some encouragement, is that if you are wondering, how do I connect with youth? My thoughts is, hey, if you show up and just own who you are and not try to be somebody different, I could walk into the room and say, I got to be just like them. I got to let them know that I wear cool clothes or anything like that, or I'm into the same stuff as them. Is I've learned that's not the key. The key is just to authentically show up with, show them your heart, why you care about them, and to just, give them what you need to give them, and no attachment on the other side. Because I can't, and you know this too, Devin, like we can't create change in someone's life. We can only share and hope that they take something from it. And it takes the weight off of our shoulders, but also allows us to show up better. And so I'm curious, Devin, from what you've seen, is how can we better connect with young people if, we're older like myself, in your 30s or maybe in your 40s or 50s? What is your advice for us?
Yes, and so I do want to start apologizing if you hear any background noise. They're getting ready to dismiss at school, so
Okay.
I'm sitting in an empty classroom because it is my study hall, and I have a meeting directly after this. But um, if you hear that, I apologize. Now, why? What is important of connecting with youth? I love that what you said, and I think it's my answer as well. And I take this back. This is a question that I was asked in the OPA conference or the OPA panel. And one thing I said is, I think be an ally to them, and just kind of let them know that you recognize their potential. You recognize what they're doing. And again, it goes back, don't talk down to them. Whereas I think a lot of times, parents, when kid makes a mistake, a lot of times this parent is disappointed, but it means so much when you go and you have a conversation with them and you're kind of like, you know what? I know that you're better than that. I'm not going to hold that against you. I recognize your potential. And that's ultimately how you establish that mutual connection. It's just kind of wanting to get involved, wanting to know more about them, wanting to know their interests, their passions, all that they're interested in, rather than focusing on the negative thing. And it almost goes back to social emotional learning inside of schools and the importance of relationships that you build with students. And I think it's the same with youth. It's the same principle, showing that you care about their emotions, that you are actually going to follow up on them and build, that relationship with them, more or less focusing on not what they're doing wrong, but what they're doing right. And that's kind of how I say, and I think about how adults have connected with me. And I think it's exactly that. They've recognized my potential. They've actually shown that they care, and they've been involved. So you're hearing that now. So.
Well, that probably means I need to let you go. Um, Before I do, is there anything else that you want to share? We can close out this episode, but knowing that there's people, leaders in prevention on this, school counselors, principals, coalition leaders, is there anything else that you didn't get to say that maybe you'd want to share?
I think the biggest thing that I would share is that sometimes the road may be a little rough. Maybe you have this kid that you have a lot of passion on and are just kind of not giving in. I share, just keep the faith, keep holding on, keep trying to impact them. And I love that you said is you can't force change. And it reminds me of something that I learned at CACA, and it says, although we're equipping you with these strategies, it's up to you to take these strategies home and implement them in your community. And I think it's the same principle that you're saying here. You can't force somebody to do something. You can't force someone to want to change, want to make an impact in their life, but you can do everything that you can to show them that they're capable of doing that, and try to equip them with the strategies to do that. And that's what I would focus on, especially right now, as we look at how COVID-19, and I hate to say it, but it's really impacted youth. And so it really is important to have that adult in a kid's life to, share the passion, share the impact, let them know that their potential is there. And so just keep holding on is what I like to say. And there may be some bumps, there may be some setbacks, but keep holding on, but also realize that you can't force someone to change. And so empower those voices, make those safe spaces, and keep being that adult, that champion for that, student, that kid, that, cousin, that family member, the son, the daughter, whatever it might be. Keep being that person for that person, because I promise you it is making an impact.
I love talking with you, man. It's before I let you go, is there anything that ways that we can keep in touch with you, or anything you're looking for, whether it's, emails, jobs, whatever it is, any way that we can help you, please let us know, or any ways that you want to stay in contact with people in the prevention field. Would love for you to share that.
Sure. So my email is going to be my first name, and I don't know if you'd be able to see my name, but it's DEVINDUNCAN 829 at gmail.com. And my LinkedIn is just my first name, last name, DEVINDUNCAN. So fairly simple, double D, Devin Duncan. And so I always love when people reach out to me. That's how Jake reached out to me. He found my LinkedIn. He sent me a message and followed up via email, and I'm here now. And so if there is an opportunity out there, you're interested in speaking with me, maybe you want to give me some feedback or some alternative to what I've shared here, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn or connect with you via email. And I'm always open to all opportunities. I love that you said if there was an opportunity. I'm always open to all opportunities, whether it's a conversation just like this, a phone call, whether an email conversation. I'm always open to it. I actually check my email and I respond to my email. So don't hesitate to send me an email, because you will get a response out of me. And I'd love to connect with anyone. This is obviously a topic that I'm very passionate about. And so anytime that someone picks my passion, it makes me smile. And I love how you said I could talk to you all day, because I could do the same. And so, yes.
Well, this was incredible. I would second that, I messaged Devin a day later, we had email chain going on, and we decided to do a podcast episode together. And I know I'm going to see him around at CADCA. I'm going to be following all the great work he's doing in this community. So I just second that. Follow him on LinkedIn. If not, just to inspire you every day to keep doing what you're doing. So I will leave you at that. And for everyone listening, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Party Talk. I hope that you feel empowered to keep doing the work that you're doing. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review to let us know what you think. And also send us those people that you want us to interview, because this is what it's all about, supporting each other. We are a team. No one can do it alone. So let's make some change.